before we jump into the topic, then let me just jump into Confluence, right? And I'll kind of describe what Confluence is for you all. And if we need to talk about Jira too, let me know. I'm more than happy to talk about everything Atlassian, and I could probably talk for hours about all this Atlassian stuff. But in a nutshell, if you've ever been on Wikipedia, this is the way I like to describe Confluence, is if you've ever been on Wikipedia, Confluence is just a place where you go put information. It's a knowledge sharing tool that is designed to capture what usually would go into like a Word document or some sort of an Excel file, right? Information. You put it in Confluence. So common things that most people put is like meeting notes, requirement documentation, design specifications, plans. I don't know if I mentioned how-to articles already, but how-to articles are a common thing. Pretty much anything and everything that you want to share from just your mind, your head on product development or whatever you're working on. Confluence is the place to go and essentially capture your knowledge. And it's a really, really fun and intuitive thing. It works just like Google Docs. It works just like Microsoft Word, with the only exception that you don't produce a file. You just create like a web page. And that web page kind of works like a Wikipedia, like an internal wiki for your company. And a lot of teams use it, again, just for internal knowledge sharing, but it does have public use. So some companies, like some of the app makers that make plugins for the Atlassian ecosystem, they actually use Confluence to do to maintain their FAQs. So if you want, you can actually have public facing pages or information that then your customers can come in and look at, like, well, here's our how-to guides and here's an FAQ and stuff like that. So really, really powerful with respect to capturing content and ideas. But very recently, Atlassian started expanding on it. They've been investing a lot into Confluence, and some of the things that we're going to be talking about today is going to be the whiteboard functionality and a little bit of the databases. The database is a lot newer. It maybe came out, I don't know, within the last month or so. Whiteboards has been out since I think the past summer, since at least June or July. And so I'm going to be focusing more heavily on the whiteboard capability because it's a lot more fleshed out, and as of late is no longer in beta. But then we'll talk about Confluences. I think in the interest of having somebody new to Confluence, I'm just going to show you real quickly what a traditional Confluence page looks like, and then I'll jump into the whiteboards and into the databases. So traditionally, when you click the plus button, there's a couple of different ways to create stuff in Confluence. There's this plus button right here that works really, really well. And there's a create button over here. Now, before I get that too far in that, right, we're inside of a space. So first of all, I'm inside of Confluence. This is the tool. But then there's spaces. So you can see that this is my space. It's called Alex Ortiz. But if I click on spaces over here, we're able to create, think of these like departments, right? Just to categorize your information. So different teams, like your marketing team, your product development team, your engineering team, they can all have their own spaces. And Confluence gives you the ability to manage the permissions so that this team can be private versus this team and so on, right? So it's not like totally open to everybody, right? And keep put this link here on pricing. If you wanted to see just what the capabilities and functionalities are, highly recommend you check out that link because it's going to show you all the power on the left. And then you can click a little bit more into it and it'll kind of give you a little bit more information as to what it does. And so I highly recommend you check this out and just to kind of get a little bit more familiar with what does Confluence do. So anyway, so we're in a space, right? And by default, whenever you get added to Confluence, you get your own personal space, although that can be managed by your administrator if they want to. But most companies, for the most part, if you add a new user, they're going to get their own space the moment they log into Confluence. And then they can interact with what they call communal spaces, which I hate that word, but I guess it makes sense. But these are really like team spaces in my opinion, but they call them communal. But the personal space is what you're seeing here. So just know that I'm inside of a space. I'm inside of my own personal space. And now when I hit the create button or the little plus button over here, I'm able to create a page, which is what I'm going to show you next, whiteboard, a database, which is also something I'm going to show you over the next hour or so, and then a blog, which I've been using Confluence for 7 years, and I think I've maybe seen one or two teams use a blog. So it's not a very common feature, but it's there in case you want to do a blog. Now, let's just focus on the page and kind of show you the basics of a page, and I'll close this stuff out because, I do this stuff all day, right? And so this is just a blank canvas. So what's cool about Confluence, it's just like a Word doc or a Google Sheets or a Google Doc, right? They're just a blank piece of white paper that you can then creatively do whatever the heck you want. But if you're not very creative, like me, because I am not the most creative person in the world, and you'll see this throughout my demo, on the far right side of your screen, you'll see that there's templates. There's over 131 different templates, and you can actually pick on some of the most common things that Atlassian thinks their users tend to use Confluence for. So sprint planning can be kind of chaotic, and so they give you a template for how do we manage our sprints a little bit better. Maybe you are doing a software architecture review. Well, there's a template for that. Retrospectives, if you're doing some of the agile stuff, you can do that. One-on-one meetings, right? And so there's a whole lot of different templates, like I said, 131 of them, that all you got to do is, like, maybe we're doing this content strategy one here. I can click on it, and the template will be automatically populated for me. And now all I need to do is start filling it out with information, right? So I'm a content creator, so this one's the one that caught my attention. And you can essentially just start populating it. Now I'm trying to get rid of this thing over here on the left. Atlassian loves to bombard us with new pop-ups. This is a fairly new behavior from Atlassian where they in your face throw stuff. Kind of annoying, but we're there. So essentially this is all of Confluence pages, right? You give it a title, my content strategy page, and then you start filling out. You can use it, you can delete stuff if you don't like it. You can just, backspace delete, hit the trash can, do whatever you got to do. Add more headers. It's very visual, right? So you can add like little emojis and stuff like that. But essentially you're limited to your creativity, and you can just capture whatever information you want to do, add tables and whatnot. And once you're done, you hit publish. And once you publish it, you pick where it's going to be, but I'm just going to publish it by the default location. And now that page is out, now accessible by anybody in your team. They can come in here, edit it, look at the information. You can tag people. There's like a comment section at the bottom, so it starts behaving a little bit like Jira. And it also connects with Jira. So if maybe you have tickets inside Jira, you can definitely leave that for a feature session where Jira and Confluence better together. It's one of my more popular series that I have on the internet. So that's, in a nutshell, this is what Confluence is. So hopefully that helped. If you're seeing Confluence for their very, very first time, that is the biggest use case or the biggest use of Confluence today before we get into the topics of whiteboards. Fortunately for us, we have AI has now entered Confluence. And so I haven't tried it a whole lot yet just because I'm so overwhelmed with just all the work that I'm constantly doing. But AI can help you now, right? So there's sections here where we can tap into this Atlassian Assistant here, and it will help us with our writing. So maybe we just brainstorm some stuff. So there's like a brainstorming section. There's a way for you to write stuff, and you're like, make it a little bit more empathetic, make it a little bit more neutral, make it a little bit more educational, and it'll rewrite the things for you. So AI is definitely here to help you maybe even fix your spelling or grammar, because I'm a horrible typer. So it's kind of interesting that there's now, for that writer's block, we can leverage a little bit of ChatGPT type of environments inside of Confluence. Now, one last thing that I want to note, because you said something really interesting, is these are all the templates that Atlassian builds. If you are a creative person, again, I'm not, but if you are, you do have the ability to essentially create a page however you want. Maybe your company takes notes in a very specific format where you can create your own templates that then the rest of your team can use. So you don't have to use the templates here. So I'm just going to go back to these templates here. You don't have to use these. You can actually make your own for your company. So that's kind of cool as well. So again, it's very customizable. So if you find something that works, templatize it and then broadcast it out to your team to work on. So that's Confluence in a nutshell. Oh, I didn't want to tell you. So one of the more common use cases that I have, right? So I'm a big Agile coach. So I'm typically walking teams through how do we practice Agile with the tools? And 90% of my Agile coaching happens in Jira. But there's one thing that I love to do inside of Confluence, and that is retrospective. So Confluence has a template here. So I'm going to hit back to this page here, where if I type retro over here, you'll see that I have a retrospective page. Atlassian is probably not the best. There's their start, stop, and keep doing. Other teams like to change this up to do whatever you want. But the retrospective and using this retrospective here is one of the more common, more popular templates that I see teams use, because almost every Agile team does a retrospective. And so there's a segue that I'm gonna use this to segue into whiteboards. But this is a very, I want to say old school, but it's not the right word. But it's a very traditional way of doing your retrospectives, where you create this page, you put a date, you call out who was there, your name of your team. And then from the audience, usually you have somebody driving. Somebody is like leading the meeting, like your scrum master, and they're collecting the information, because everybody's, providing input if you've ever done a retrospective. And people are going to say like, hey, well, these are the things that we need to start doing. These are the things that we need to stop doing. And it's a very visual thing, or it's a very text-based thing, right? Like, need to start doing, like attend more ACE events, right? Stop doing, like schedule these at night, right? Like, right? And like keep doing, like network with more members of Atlassian community, right? And so this is typically how folks interact with these templates, and specifically the retrospective one. Maybe you want to capture an action, right? So I can go at King Bob. Actually, I don't know. Bob has it here as, let me find my buddy Robert here. There we go. At Robert, this is an action for you, right? And when I hit publish, then Robert's going to get an email. This page becomes available. Everybody that was I got retro one. Everybody that was tagged in here as a participant will get a link and an email basically telling them like, hey, you were mentioned in the retrospective today, and here's some of the actions, right? So that's the very traditional way of doing retrospectives. If you've ever been using Confluence since, like, I don't know, 2015, 2014 timeframe, right? The last 10 years, that's how you normally have done the utilization of Confluence and retrospectives. But at Teams 23, so almost a year ago, Atlassian introduced this new concept, or this new functionality called whiteboards. And I really, really like whiteboards. I think it's something that Atlassian has a long way to go, because it's no Miro killer yet. Miro's still my tool of choice, but it works natively inside of Confluence. And so we're going to transition over to whiteboards, because I absolutely love the whiteboards. I think whiteboards is one of my more favorite features. One of the coolest things that I think Atlassian has introduced in a very, very long time. Like I mentioned, though, it's still got a long way to go. It's still not, I would still pick Miro. If I had to pick, right? If I had two choices to make and it was life and death, I'm picking Miro still. But whiteboards is awesome. Like, it's still going to be really cool. And so if you don't want to go pay extra for Miro because it's a separate subscription, a separate fee, whiteboards is going to do you some really, really good wonders. So let me hit the create button here. And this time, instead of creating a page, we're going to hit up the whiteboard. And very similar to what we looked at when we were hitting the create button on the page, we're greeted with templates. And so this is some of the templates that Atlassian has deemed worthy, right? They're expanding these daily, if not weekly. Every time I come in here, there's new stuff. And what whiteboards is in a nutshell. So if you've ever used Miro, then you know exactly what whiteboards are, right? Because it's basically Miro's or Confluence, Atlassian's versions of Miro, right? So there's that. But if you're in the unfortunate part of your life where you haven't used or heard of Miro, and you haven't heard of whiteboards, then let me tell you what whiteboards are. I got a question here. Whiteboard is not officially launched, right? Or it launched already. So whiteboards is officially out of beta, and it has officially launched. Now, this happened within the last couple of weeks. So all the tags here might not happen, but an email communication did go out recently Confluence Whiteboards end of beta, because they announced the pricing. And so I know it just came out like literally like a week or two ago. And so it might still be trickling out, but they have officially, Atlassian has officially said Whiteboards is at least coming out of beta, right? And maybe it's still like barely still in beta for a few, but it's definitely, Atlassian has said we're done. We're gonna charge you for it, and it's gonna be something that you can actually use now. And unfortunately, like if you're on the free versions and standard versions, you're not gonna have the best experience. Your Atlassian is really pushing for premium and enterprise customers, and so premium and enterprise are gonna get all the functionalities. But yeah, Whiteboards right now is either at the very tail end of beta, or for some people it's already rolled out of beta, right? So it just kind of depends on the UI, right? Atlassian rolls it out differently, but yeah, an announcement definitely came out at least 1 or 2 weeks ago. So anyways, great question, Deepak, right? So what we're gonna do though is I'm gonna do a simple retrospective, right? I'm just gonna pick a template and I'm gonna show you what the whiteboards are, right? Because this is the whiteboard. Now, it looks a little overwhelming, but you don't normally need all this stuff over here. These are just kind of like tips on how to use it if you've never used it before. So I do highly recommend you take a look at it because it's really cool. And what's cool about whiteboards, it behaves a lot like Miro, right? So if you've ever used Miro before, and you just pan around and you look around and you can like zoom in on stuff, and then you can add things, right? So you can have a blank canvas. Think of it like a whiteboard. Like a regular physical whiteboard that you might have in your office, right? It's just a digital playground where you can visually articulate your ideas. So instead of just typing ideas in a very like Word document type of feeling, you can use a lot of visuals. And so I'll show you the different visuals we have available to us. So that in a nutshell is basically what whiteboards are, right? So let me walk you through what we're seeing here, right? So this is obviously the template. We'll talk about this in a second. So I'm going to push it that way to hide it, because I want to show you like what are the key functionalities of whiteboards, okay? So one, you already saw me kind of panning. So there's this pan button. So that allows you to move around, right? So you can drag things around, and this is how I hit everything. If you want to select something, right? So I'm going to pan this back. You can have the select arrow, and you can select text, or you can select boxes, or whatever you want, right? So those are the two major, like, how do you navigate? Now, I only click on the middle on the scroll wheel, and I'm able to do the pan and then the select with my left click. Now, stickies, this is the most common way that folks interact, right? So you can drop a sticky here, and you can copy and paste these, and so this works just like any other visual tool that you may have used. But notice that they're kind of small, right? But what's interesting is the whiteboard idea is you got to shift your mindset on zoomability, right? Like this is very common to look at something like this. And when you're actually working on something critical, you zoom in and you make it like this big now, right? So you're like hyper zoomed. And so if you've ever used Miro, you'll feel right at home, because with Miro you like hyper zoom all the way in, and then you can zoom out, and like it's an interesting way of navigating the user interface. But I'm basically zoomed in. I can zoom in at this level and start writing text in my sticky, right? So like I can just put sticky 1, and obviously when I zoom out, it's going to be tiny, but I can put a collection of them together. I can move these however I want. I can also change the color of them. So you can do a couple of cool different things with them. And so when you're zoomed out, like you can kind of find where you're at a little bit easier, or you can just zoom in and just put things right where you want it, right? So you can do just regular text. So I can double click into it or do normal text, or you can change it to like headers. You can make things bold. You can center the text, or you can move it to the left. You can add a bullet, right? So a couple different cool things there. But my favorite feature, right? Because as I mentioned, most people are just going to put stickies because you're just trying to capture some information, right? You're typically inside of some box, right? So typically, I'm going to come back over here to this good, the bad, and the better, right? Typically, when you're running something like a retrospective, your team's going to come in here and start putting in things that went good, right? So they'll put a bunch of ideas here, and then we'll make them red, just because red usually not a good idea or not a good thing, right? And so these are the things that could be better, right? So your team will then come in here collaboratively because everybody can jump in on here. There's the ability to share it with people, and everybody can be moving around and doing things together, right? But this is essentially what ends up happening with your retrospectives. It becomes a little bit more visual, right? So we have all these stickies, and imagine that all these have some text that are actually relevant to the column. But here's my favorite feature. Let's just say that we have an improvement, right? Something that can be done better. And let's just say that we want a make presentation better, right? Because maybe my PowerPoint with 3 words on it was not the coolest thing in the world, right? But we got to take action, right? This is an action item. Somebody's got to go make the thing better. And so you saw earlier, right? When I was in the page, I can do an action, and I was able to tag my friend Robert, and I told him like, hey, this is your thing, right? Y'all remember that? But that action stays inside of Confluence. But Confluence is not a very good task tracker. It's a knowledge management tool. So wouldn't it be cool if we can put that action inside the task tracker tool that we use, which is Jira, right? Well, that's where this comes into play, right? So I can take these stickies that, again, feels very natural. If you've ever been in a big room planning together or some sort of a physical room together and you guys are just brainstorming, right? It's natural to use stickies. I have stickies everywhere. I have like a lot of stickies that I'm always collaborating, brainstorming, right? And so it's a very natural digital feeling. But now I want to take the action. Now I want to do the Jira ticket. So after I brainstorm, after I've done all the, very, very low barrier to entry, very natural interaction and collaboration, I can just simply come in here, click on this button, and give it an issue type here. Let's see if this actually works. I may have not given myself the right project here, but let me see if I can do this here. There we go, story. So I'll make it a story. I'll assign it to myself. I'll put my name in here. There it is. And I'm going to hit create. And watch this. It went away from being a sticky, and it's now a Jira issue. And this is really, really powerful because when I go into Jira itself, so I'm going to open it up in a new tab, the statuses of Jira, right, carry over. So now that I moved it to in progress over here, I may need to hit refresh real quick. So give me a second to hit refresh. Cue elevator music while this refreshes. Here we go. So you'll see that it's now in progress, right? But now I can take this story, I can organize it with epics, I can plan it into a sprint, I can do whatever I need to do at this point with that task from my Agile framework or however you do your task tracking inside of Jira. This now becomes an element over there in Jira, which then has a visual component over here on the Confluence side. So this right here is like, it's worth like $1 million for me, right? Because it is so easy. It's so intuitive to bring these stickies and everybody's moving things around and everybody's collaborating, especially in this distributed world that we live in. And then it's a pain. It's usually a pain to go back into Confluence and go, okay, so where are all the actions? What do I need to go recreate, right? Duplicate the data inside of Jira where we're actually going to execute, right? And so this right here is awesome. Yeah, so I'm going to do a Command C, Command V real quick. That was that right there. So I can go crazy here and just paste them. Apparently I got to click in some white space, but yeah, that'll work. And so all you got to do is just type in something, right? So show how to create Jira issue. Once you have some text in there, you just click on this create Jira issue up here. Oops, there. Hopefully, let me see if I can move it. Nope, it won't let me move it. So move your chats from the top right corner there. You pick your project.
I moved. Okay. I moved it already.
Great, perfect. So you pick your project. You pick the issue type that you want this to be. Just pick a story. Everything else is, if it doesn't have an asterisk, is optional. You can add more fields as well as if you want, right? So I can bring like due dates and stuff like that. So I'm a big fan of the due date. So let's just say that it's due next Friday. I'm going to assign it to myself because accountability. And then I'm going to hit create. So when I do that, that information is going to be over here on the ticket. So I do believe that I might be able to modify this. Maybe not. But you can expand it to see all the issues or all the information without having to leave Confluence, or I can open it in a new tab and actually leave Confluence and go into Jira and do my management inside of Jira there. Or I can also change, so maybe it's just a URL. Maybe you want it not displayed as a URL, and oh boy, how do I get out of here then? The path that you take me down, man. All right, let's see if Control Z does anything. There it is. Control Z does work. Thank you, Control Z. Or you can embed it as well. So now you got the big giant card. So if you got a lot of space, right, you can just bring the whole thing in here, and you can zoom out, and you can just move the whole card, which I wouldn't recommend. This takes up a lot of real estate, but you do you, boo. So if you want the whole thing, you can have that, or you can just do the card, which I think is the easiest, right? So it looks like that.
Yeah, thank you. That is so cool and powerful and efficient. Thanks again.
Yeah, again, this is my favorite feature, but it doesn't end there. Once we have multiple of these, notice that I can now connect them, right? And I can link the issues together. So now I can do like, are these blocking each other, right? And so this relationship will now flow into Jira. And so now I have that blocking relationship, but this is so much more visual, because when you're looking at blocked items in Jira, then you're like, okay, cool, they're blocked. But now I can visualize a hierarchy, right? Now I can visualize an order of operations and say, well, clearly this one here needs to happen before this one. And then I can create more and block more things. And even if it's not ready to be blocked, maybe it's not ready to be a Jira issue yet, I can block to just a thing, right? Where maybe we got a noodle on it later, maybe it's still not ready for prime time, but we can definitely do some feature planning there. But we can have these relationships. So this is really cool, in my opinion, right? Being able to visualize your work like this is, to me, it's a game changer, right? Because a picture's worth 1,000 words, but these illustrations, right, especially when you're coming up with your product development, and English is hard to communicate, and a lot of things can get lost in translation, right? Like, it's hard to argue with a picture like this. Like, you can clearly articulate, this has to happen, and then this story, and then that story. And so now when you go plan your sprints, it's like, it's trivial, because otherwise you're trying to just figure life out, and it's really confusing when you're just on the backlog by itself. So we'll keep going with whiteboards, because this is way more fun. All right. So again, so you have your template, you have the visual element, right? You have the stickies, but you can add text wherever you want. So if you want to just start writing some text here, right? This is how you start, like, just adding information to just kind of organize the data, right? But what's cool is, like, you can also, like, expand it. So again, so when you zoom out, like, you can make it real big, right? And so you can have the text, so you can organize, like, my retrospective, right? And stuff like that. So the text can be big, it can be tiny, it can help just describe however you want. So you just click on this little text one here, and you can put some text here, like you can put important here. Obviously you can't see it, but then when I zoom in, it's there, but then I can make it bigger, right? I can change the color of it. I can make it bold, right? So little cool stuff like that. But yeah, so you can just move things around. Very, very, very fluid. All right, so Tushar's got the question in here. Really cool feature, but I saw it's a cloud-only feature now. Any chances of DC version? No way, Jose. This is Atlassian. Folks, if you're on DC, God forbid you're on server, Atlassian has no love, man. That's all cloud or nothing. This is the way. This is the future of Atlassian, is in the cloud. So if you're going to want any of this stuff, you got to get yourself over to the cloud. It's the only way to get this stuff. So sorry about that. We're using Mirror right now, and it's really cool if we can get in Confluence. Yeah, it's Atlassian. I wish sometimes I worked for Atlassian so that I can go knock some sense into them. Like, I don't think it's fair, but corporate profits and whatnot. So anyways, that's the that there. Okay, so we got a question from Deepak. To search particular stuff like brainstorming, Word, Control F works, or another. I don't know if that's a question. Folks, we have to jump off. We're in Chris's living room and people are sleeping. This was amazing. Okay, thank you very much, Marcelo. We'll post this on my YouTube channel at one point. So if you have any questions, I hope you and everybody in that living room should subscribe over to my channels, so that you can follow along. So I'll put the link here again, the QR code, Marcelo, if you want to grab it real quick before you leave. But scan that QR code there, and make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you'll get somewhere where you need to be.
I already subscribe
Okay,
and I've been
perfect.
watching a bunch of your videos
Oh,
already.
okay, perfect. Then never mind. It's a moot
I've
point.
actually been on your the Zero Life
Oh, well,
channel, by the way.
even better. All right,
So
I
cool.
think I think you're doing well, Alex. You got a good speaking voice, very captivating. So I think you're gonna do well with YouTube.
Yeah, even at 10:30 at night, man. I've never done it this
Yeah, well,
late.
you
I've
talk slow enough but very clear enough for even somebody who's taking this on to try to catch up, with Marcelo, my partner. So this is his thing. I'm the sales guy, but I could pick up things quick, but this was
Perfect.
pretty easy to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty cool.
thank
Yeah.
you.
So hopefully some of the other videos help you out then. All right. So let's keep pushing along then, right? Because like my bedtime is literally like an hour and a half ago. So I am hurting here, folks. And I don't drink coffee. I don't drink tea. I don't do anything. So let's just power through this so that I don't fall asleep on you all. Okay. So we also have shapes. So you have like circles and stuff like this. So if you want to do like I'm just gonna move. I'm just making a mess here, right? So I'm just gonna move over to the side. So maybe you want to do like some sort of a decision tree, right? So you have a square where like maybe you're now doing like a design document, or you're trying to do like a flow, right? And you're like, hey, what's the logic, right? Well, we're gonna do step one, and then you're gonna be able to like do the diamond, right? Like if you've ever done a Visio diagram where you're trying to figure out how your thing's gonna be, like you're designing the UI, right? And you're like, well, here's step one. The user's gonna be like add to cart question mark, and so if they go yes, we can go this way, and if they, so we're like, if they add to the cart, right? Let's just assume we're building like an Amazon killer, right? Like push item to cart. If no, right? If they say no, then like, I don't know, send back to product page, right? And so we can zoom in on this and we can type in like yes, we can type in no, right? So if you've ever done, again, a Visio diagram or some sort of a flow diagram, this should look very familiar, right? So you have this, it's very basic, right? You have very basic shapes like squares, circles, diamonds, right? You don't have a whole lot. So obviously Visio is going to be a million times more powerful, but this is good enough, right? This is good enough to articulate an idea. And the best part, right? This push item to cart. This is going to be a task that some poor developer is going to have to do. Now I can create it into a Jira issue right here. I can just hit the create button. And now it's not just a square, right? Now it's like, here's the task, right? Somebody's got a story to do this one. Now you can plan into the sprint. Your PM's involved, right? But now it's a very visual thing and you know exactly what you're doing here. And like, I'm telling you, like, this to me is like, for teams to not be using this functionality is just mind blowing, mainly because people don't know it exists yet. But it's truly game changing, right? Especially when you're trying to design and when you're engineering something, right? When you're creating something out of nothing, just relying on words to articulate your thoughts is dangerous, right? If you've ever played the telephone game, right, it's hard. But when you're seeing the thing, it becomes so much easier. So this right here, I think every engineering team should be using this, or any team in general, right? If you ever had a communication problem, try using whiteboards. So there's that, right? So that's kind of what these little shapes here do. Then we got the connectors, right? So we got straight lines over here. So you got like very, very straight lines, or you got the squiggly lines where you can kind of go a little bit, a little bit more squiggly, right? So there's that. And then the other things that we have are sections, right? So we can create sections, right? So design, right? And so now you can grab all these items, or we can make this box a little bit bigger, right? We can go like that, go like this, put this box right on top of everything we just did, right click on it, bring it to the back, and now all my drawings are in there. So now I can start, getting a little bit more creative, and I can have a design section. I can have a, whatever you want. Maybe it's a contact us page that flows into the shopping cart page, right? Maybe you're building an e-commerce thing, right? So you can start grouping and categorizing. You can change the color of these. I love that they have way more colors, right? And so you can have a lot of, colors and dividers and sections to segregate the logical thinking of whatever it is you're building. So really, really cool stuff there. You can add a little bit of shadow. Don't know that it made anything difference with this color, but it's there if you want to use it. Anybody actually see an effect? Oh wow, this is a very, really poorly done shadow effect, but it makes like the thing here bold. All right. I wouldn't spend too much time on that one. Create an action. Again, we're taking these items and just sticking them into Jira, which I think is just the best functionality of this all thing. Now, the last couple of things that I'll show you, right, is we can import from Jira. So we can actually click on this button here. In case you missed it, it's this little Jira button here. And we've been doing it very one way, right, from Confluence into Jira. But let's just say we want to do like a sprint planning session and we want to do this in a a little bit more visual way. Well, I can bring in all my stories, right? So I can just bring them all in here, divide them up, connect them, right? Start moving things around and go, well, this one comes before this one. This one's going to block this one, right? And so I can start doing all my linking, all my blocking. This one and this one are related, or they're, I don't know, they deploy it, right? Or whatever you want relates to. You can add whatever relationships you have inside of Jira. You can just simply bring those in here and you can start connecting things. Maybe this story is dependent on this one, and maybe it's dependent on this one over here, right? So we can start organizing this data so that it flows a little bit easier, so we can start seeing, again, that order of operations, because not everything is created equal. Sometimes the order matters, right? And so you wouldn't want to work on this story over here when this one's first, right? Like if you have this kind of a phenomenon, this allows you to articulate to your team, folks, don't work on this one. This is the last one, right? Work over here, work on this one. And yeah, so, and we can add those sections, right? So remember that section here, we can do, whoopsie, come on. Here we go. So we can do sprint 1. And in a very visual way, we can just start figuring out which, we can start figuring out which stories belong to which sprint, right? And so I can do, here's my sprint 1 stuff. I can grab another one over here and put it over here, different color. So I'm going to change this to, we'll go red on this one. And this one's going to be sprint 2, right? Maybe you work off of releases, right? So it's up to you, however you want to organize this. But as you can see, like we can start getting very creative here with the work and planning things out, right? So it's a very big visual way of doing your planning. Unlike Jira, where you're just in a backlog and you're just looking at stuff, right? That's not very helpful. So that's what that button did. Again, all it did was it brings whatever you want into Confluence, into the whiteboard, so you just have access to them. And then we got stamps. This is a little bit more for the younger folks, I think, right? So if you just want to, say this one's cool, like I can just put stickers everywhere. It adds a little pizzazz, right? Like if you're trying to like, hey, this one for reals, like, well, let's do this one, right? So just again, allows your team to communicate. And then we can add links to pretty much anything, right? So another Confluence page, Jira, Atlas. So if you're using those tools. And then finally, my favorite feature that we haven't talked about is timers. So we can set timers here. So if you're giving your team 5 minutes to do something, we can do that. And now we can be interacting. And I got a timer going, very visual. Everybody's kind of aware of it. And it gives time people to break out and brainstorm and collaborate and do all the stuff that we were just doing, but in a more, organized and controlled manner. So that, my friends, is Confluence Whiteboards.
So one question for you, Alex. This data, whatever is generated, can it be exported? That's question number 1. And where is this data stored? Is it going to be stored only within specific regions, or it can be migrated across different regions within Atlassian? What is the data residency support for whiteboard data?
It's a great question. I would think that the answer is it depends on your specific region, right? So Atlassian doesn't have a whole lot of regions with respect to the cloud. And so wherever your current data is for the cloud, that's where I would assume that they're going to stick it in the same place. So like I said, there's not a whole lot of different regions when it comes to the cloud. So like mine right now is going to be on East Coast, right? Because that's where the US America one is being stored at. But in the cloud, data residency is not something we typically worry about because it's just somewhere in the cloud.
Makes sense.
But as far as exporting goes, I don't think that there's an export capability, right? This is really designed to be here, like inside of the board here. And so you would want to invite people into here, and unfortunately you do have to pay a license for everybody. Although Let me check real quickly if Confluence guest a whiteboard. So I'd have to test this out. So in Confluence, at least in the cloud, right? Because everything here is cloud based. For every paid user, you get 5 free ones. And my understanding is that these guests have the ability to do everything that you grant them access to. So I would expect them to be able to use the whiteboard, but this is something I would have to test out. But for the most part, you can bet that you're most likely going to want to pay to play. But we'll have to check in about those guests. But other than like exporting the data itself, like the only export is back to Jira. So it's between Jira and Confluence, but not external to the tools here.
Good to know. Thanks, Alex.
Any other questions? So let's focus on Confluence databases now, and I'll try to give you as much information as I can. I'm not gonna lie, I spent the last couple of hours trying to figure out Confluence databases. I enabled it like a few weeks ago when the announcement first came out, but Atlassian, even with whiteboards, right? Like Atlassian's documentation is very subpar. And interestingly enough, when you look up Confluence databases, the videos are like mine. There's 2 that are like, this one's mine, this one's mine. And then this one here is the makers of Confluence databases. That it was K15T. They were the makers of it. In this section, this capability got acquired by Atlassian. But their videos suck. They didn't show me anything beneficial. So I'm gonna show you what is available, like what you can do, and then we'll go from there. But keep in mind that databases is a very, very, very new feature. Like it's like 2 weeks old. And so Atlassian, hopefully, fingers crossed, is going to be rolling out better documentation. Because when we look at Atlassian's documentation here, oh boy, I lost it. Oh, it's over here, right? So when we look at Atlassian's documentation, this is their getting started with Confluence databases. It basically tells you how to create a database, which, my friends, all you got to do is click on this create button over here, click on databases, and you have made a database. It's empty, but we got a database. And so the fact that I need like 15 pages to just tell me how to click those 3 buttons, overkill. What do you do with the database after you have it? Atlassian needs to help us out a little bit more. So I'm going to show you kind of a teaser of how this works, or at least how it's intended to work. Show you the documentation that I've been reading through, so maybe you can do a little bit of homework. But if anybody figures it out, let me know, because I'm dying to make YouTube videos on this stuff. But this is a typical use case of, I tell Atlassian that you got to train the trainer, right? Like I need to have access to the insight stuff, because it's hard for me to teach something when they don't really tell you how to do anything of value in the database, right? So anyways, let's just jump into the database here, and let me just show you kind of what at least what I've gathered to learn about databases, and articulate that to you in the best way I possibly can. So in a nutshell, databases in Confluence are basically just a table. So if you've ever just created a table in Confluence, the database is going to feel similar. But there's some very powerful capabilities that you're going to get with the database that you don't get with a table. And what I really liked about databases, because I saw this was also one of those like April 2023 announcements that Atlassian made, and wait 10 months to actually release the beta, right? This is a cool thing. It's way more powerful. It's dynamic. It's way more dynamic than like a traditional just table inside of Confluence, right? And so before I show you or try to show you the dynamic of it, you typically come in here, right? And this is where you have a little bit more creative opportunities where you start defining these columns, right? And so you're able to change right here. So all I did earlier, right, just to recap, is I clicked the plus database. This will create your database. You can change it to whatever you want. So I'm going to call it content creation, because I know I make content. And then you can call this whatever you want, right? This is going to be like the title of the title, right? You can just simply edit the ones that exist, or you can click on this. You can click into the field and you'll get this edit field here. And then you can change things over here on the right side, right? And so you have the ability to tag, you have the ability to do users. But if I click on this little plus button over here, you'll see the types of information that you can collect. So you can collect text, you can collect numbers, dates, tags, you can tag people, links to URLs. Then there's Confluence specific items, right? So we can link to pages. We can do the page statuses if you've ever used that capability. We can do page labels, page details. Then we can connect to Jira. So you can pull in Jira issues or specific details of an issue, or you can do linking from other databases. So this right here is what makes it dynamic, because when we start linking from other databases, this is where things get way, way more interesting, because now instead of it being static, we can have another value in another database drive this database. So kind of a cool thing. And this is really the more powerful part. Everything else here is kind of just organizational. So anyways, I'm going to add a date, right? Because I'm going to publish something. So I need to publish date here. And other than that, right? So once you have that, then you just start populating it, right? So actually I'm going to add one more item here. I'm going to add a page link, and I'm going to call this one, I don't know, the content page. Okay. So now that I have this, right, I can literally start populating it, right? So I'm going to make a video on Confluence databases, right? I'm going to tag it with YouTube, right? Because maybe I want to tag where I'm going to do it on LinkedIn, or I'm going to do it on X or Twitter, or whatever you want to call it these days, right? I'm going to put who's responsible for it. It's going to be Alex, right? It's going to be me. And I'm going to give myself a publish date. I need to publish it by Monday. And then over here, this is where I can now connect with a content strategy page, right? So I can make a page, and now notice that I have a link to another page. So I have a page over here with the information that we were talking about earlier, right? So this is essentially how these work, right? So you just start populating them, right? Again, it feels very much like a table. You start adding more videos, you add more pages. But with the dynamics, the dynamic part, right? I'm going to switch over to Atlassian's documentation to kind of show you, right? Over here, like, let me go back one more page. This is one more page here. This right here is the documentation that is officially available for the databases. I'm going to grab this one, put it in the chat if I'm able to do so here. And this is where you kind of come for your inspiration, right? So this will walk you through how to get started, right? How to create it, how to add those fields that I just described, how to give you some tips for how to structure, right? All the different field types. You can click into each of these, and it'll tell you a little bit more of what it does. So I highly recommend you look through these, right? Because one, it's a lot happening. Like, there's a lot of options here to cover in the next 10, 15 minutes. And so highly recommend check out that link that I sent you and read through it, right? Because it's going to explain in detail what these items are, right? So the one thing that I'm really, really interested in is these entry details, right? Because this is what's going to allow me to link one database to the other. And this is powerful. So that's that one. There's articles on displaying, right? So there's different views. So instead of just looking at it as a table view, you can select into them and see them as different views. So there's like a very visual way, because you can add images. You can do these filtering, so you can control exactly what data you do or don't see. So there's a lot of interesting and creative ways to display your data, which again, this article is going to describe all for you. So I'll leave these again for you to kind of go in and check it out. Now, I do highly, highly recommend you check out these macros here. These are going to be important, because without this, you're kind of just creating a static database. You need to lock this in, right? Based on my research here, you got to lock this section in so that you can build a dynamic portion of it. Because what the database is supposed to do, and I'll show you, let me go back to that use case that I was going to show you earlier. What the database feature is supposed to do that I really, really liked when I first saw it for the first time is that dynamically, right? So in this example here, I'm going to blow this picture up so you can see it. In this picture here, we have statuses, right? And these statuses, I can go in, just like in Jira, and update them, right? I can update them here. But notice that they're linked to a page, right? They're linked to actual pages. Well, if you keep following through with their documentation, you'll notice that we have the ability for that individual page. If I look at it over here in the bottom, we have the ability for this individual page that I'm looking at to also have a status. And if I update the status there, rather than me having to now go and update the status somewhere else, right, to keep track of every, right, it becomes very manual, very tedious. The databases eliminates that, right? The moment I update it here, right, so the moment I update my status here and this on the actual page, the database is going to reflect that it's published, right? And so that's kind of the cool part of the database, right? That's the use case here for Tushar, who's asking like, what's the use case, right? Right? Is it's to do this, right? So ideally you can create variables essentially inside of pages that then drive information over on the main database, right? So you have like a central database with children pages, and those children pages are controlling what shows up on the database. So you don't have to duplicate the data. So I think that's the coolest feature in my opinion about the databases, but again, it's still very, very rocky, very bumpy. I recommend there's a community page here. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Here we go. I recommend there's like a community section here. I'm gonna give you guys the link here. Go there and sign up. This is where again some of the EAP people are coming in. I'm hoping that there's more documentation. I'm hoping that there's more support. I just requested to join. There's 512 people in it. But this is the Confluence database, in my humble opinion, is something that I would wait a couple more weeks, if not a couple more months, to try out, because it's still not quite ready. Which I think, in my opinion, is kind of ironic because Atlassian bought this, right? Like it was already a plugin for Jira called Orderly by K15T. And so you would think it works better, but I was not very impressed yet. So unfortunately, unlike the whiteboards, which I was able to show you a lot of cool stuff, the Confluence databases is still too infant, in my opinion, to do anything meaningful right now. And so maybe we can come back a second time, Sankeet, and see if I can come in swinging with a little bit more information. But for right now, I put some links so you can all like kind of get started with the databases. But if you do, anybody figure something out that's cool, or if you actually manage to make it dynamic, because I was reading through their document, and like this is the reason why I started my YouTube channel, right? Because a lot of people that put trainings or documentation or videos on how to do stuff, they skip like step 1. They start you off with like step 6, and that databases or the information that I've been sharing with you, right? They skip the critical step that actually makes this interesting, right? And so I haven't quite figured it out, but rest assured that this is now, I'm going to be reaching out to Atlassian and asking them for help. I am a content creator, and so hopefully I have a little bit of access to Atlassian, and hopefully they can guide me and help me figure it out. But yeah, for right now, I owe you one. I have to give you guys an IOU because it was not cooperating with me for the last couple of days that I was trying to figure it out. So anyways, with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Oh, actually, let me just pull this one. So I, not to do a sales pitch or anything, folks, right? But check out that QR code, right? If you want to connect with me, this is where you're going to be able to follow me on LinkedIn, subscribe to the Apex, subscribe to the Jira Life. I got free courses that are hosted over on Salto. If you're a complete beginner for Jira, I got a complete beginner's course for Jira. Teachable's coming. I do have instructor-led or live training that I'm hosting with Atlassian for like the next 5 months. I've already done the month of January. I got 2 sessions planned for February. So if you liked how I teach, maybe you want to come in and take some of these free trainings. They're about an hour long, mainly on Jira Admin or Jira Software. And then if you want to help support the channels, we got a merch store. Get yourself your Jira Life t-shirt. And I hope to see you in the Jira Life.